What I can't do is I got to get rid of that. Okay.
Opening over here.
Should be ready to go. Good morning. Greetings. This is Real Talk, History as a Weapon for Black Liberation, and I'm your host, Dr. Sundiata Kaita Chajua. Our guest today is Dr. Zebulon Vance Miletsky. He is an associate professor of Africana Studies. He has a new book, Before Busing, A History of Boston's Long Black Freedom Struggle. It's been published by the University of North Carolina, 2022. Dr. Miletsky is a historian who specializes in recent African American history, civil rights and Black power, urban history, mixed race and biracial identity, and hip hop studies. His research includes African Americans in Boston, Northern freedom movements outside the South, mixed race history in the U.S., and passing an Afro-Latin diaspora. He is the author of numerous articles, reviews, essays, and he's working on an edited volume on new directions in Boston African American history. Welcome, Dr. Miletsky.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here on Real Talk. I don't know if you've seen the program, but we tend to have an interview format, and I always begin with biographical questions. I'm interested in the process by which one becomes Black. In other words, while I think the cultural nationalists had it right when they said that Blackness is color, culture, and consciousness, I think by color, we need to interpret that as ancestry, because it's not literally physical color, right? It's ancestry there must be some ancestry, but the most important aspects are culture and consciousness. That is to say, one becomes Black through socialization, and so I think you're a great person to talk in terms of that. So I use Bill Cross's negrescence theory. And so I'm often interested in the process by which one came to see Blackness as a salient identity that helped shape their understanding of who they are, as well as the nature and character of the United States empire. So I also have a tendency to interrupt. Right?
I have watched the program.
and again, this is with purpose, right? It's not just personality. With purpose, to seek clarification, and sometimes to break challenges. So, my first set of questions with you is: you're born in Berkeley, California, and in the TED Talk that you did a year or so ago, you made this interesting statement that the Dr. Boykin, the physician that delivered you, that upon, I guess, pulling you out, she says he's going to have a hard time proving he's a brother. Now, obviously, at birth, you did not understand that statement, right? So my query is this: I want you to unpack your journey, and I want you to talk about the time period in which you spent your formative years. I want you to talk about the place, because I have a sense that you're born in Berkeley but not raised in Berkeley, right? That you're raised in Boston. And I want you to talk about what is going on during your formative years in regard to the Black liberation movement. So to get to the specific question, right? As you're discussing this stuff, I want you to address that question. Did you have a hard time accepting your Blackness?
Okay. Wow. Thank you. That's a lot. I'm gonna go right into it. Do my best to take that head on. Yep. Born in Berkeley, but raised in Boston, as you mentioned, and no, that was obviously a story that was told to me. Past. In retrospect. Okay. Um, and it's funny how that works within families, things you hear. Sometimes you think you did remember it, or maybe you did, because you're with it for so long. And but yeah, I mentioned it because that was always something that was said, and I thought it kind of characterized pretty well my my experience. And my mom is a big part of this. She's, when you're biracial, you have one black parent, not two. And 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 that gender piece can be interesting as well, because when it's your mother, who's the transmitter of the culture, I will call it,
That's right.
then that comes down maybe differently here and there, but not really. But the way things work in families. But yeah, we moved pretty quickly, like to Boston, which is where my mother's from. And so much of this is about my mother, and that's her. Her family is the African American side. That's the hearth, the home. Once my parents decided they wanted to be coming back east, because my father's from New York, uh, both from the Northeast. Um, they came to Boston, and
What years are we talking about, though?
yeah, that's they would have been. They got married out there probably 1969, I want to say.
Okay.
All right. And then, yeah, something like that. And then I was, I was born in 1974. And then we left California about 19, would have been 1970, uh, uh, 77, I guess. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. That is right. We came fall of 77 to Boston. And uh, I mean, I draw all of it from just it's not very uh great story. It's just being black, it's just like growing up. And but all of that, input, was coming
But
from that
no,
from
no,
the
no, no,
family.
no, no, no. This is important. Our stories growing up are important because that's how we come to develop a sense of who we are and what we want to do. Are you familiar with the poem by Nikki Giovanni, Nikki Rosa? It's a
Mhm.
autobiographical poem, and
That
she
one.
talks about her experiences in childhood, being poor but never knowing they were poor. Right?
Right.
She ends it by saying, "I hope some white person never writes about me because they will talk about my, challenged, impoverished childhood, but all the while I was quite happy." Right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's all
yeah,
right.
I take these things seriously because that's
Yeah, no, I thank you.
by which we determine who we're going to be, and we shape that, we make that.
No,
So
there's
yeah.
no doubt. There's no doubt about it. And I was kind of, setting that stage because, even my dad, who's, he's Jewish, Caucasian from New York. Um, you know, I don't want to jump ahead, but what often happens with the interracial piece sometimes is, you can get excommunicated from your own family, and that was kind of the case with my family. So my dad really found like he was like a brother, honorary brother. I swear, like he had no one else. He really threw his lot completely in. We married my mom and fell in love with her and just became part of the family. Now, it's taken me years to actually see that. I didn't even think about it back in the day.
Hmm.
But well, some people will say, he definitely loved her because, for a New Yorker to move to Boston is like a big thing, you know, and he became a Red Sox fan of all things. So it's like
A
the
lot of
brother, the
tradition.
man went through a lot. He went through a lot, but he found a family, found a whole thing. And so why I say that is because I've sort of realized over the years that got a lot of input from him too, even though he's not black. He was. I can't tell you how many books I have, with his, signature and a note, with some soulful remarks. I'm like, "Ooh, this guy is amazing." So he was very important part of the whole thing too. But in terms of another male figure as well, my uncle, my mother's brother, Paul Deere, was a scholar, uh, taught at UMass Boston and the in the College for Public Services, it was called then. Worked with some fellow folks who have been major names in Boston in Africana studies, um, you know, and so he was always like, he's a big part of who I am, a very big part, and having him and my dad and my mom, and I had another uncle who passed away in the 90s, but the family, my mother's family, her brothers, her parents, that was a lot of very good input. Turns out I was born into this like interesting black family in Boston that's half West Indian and African American, a part of both, with roots down in North Carolina on the African American side, and some amazing stories generationally. So that was something by and by that I've started to realize, and that was good, I guess, being in Boston, because if I wasn't, I would not have been able to soak that up, and it made a big. I mean, to say it made, it's just like that those voices that echo through the ages generationally. I heard it, I heard them, I felt them, I felt it. There was something saying I got to do something. All these, and then everybody had books. Man, my parents had so many books, and then I'd go to my grandmother's house, and my grandfather was also, a bibliophile, and then my uncle, like I said, he got involved in library science and stuff. He was actually a trustee at Boston Public Library. Anyway, the man who loves books. So that was I'd be picking up these books, looking at them, and thinking, always like thinking like I want to make some kind of contribution. It was so grand. I have memories of just beautiful. These were articulate, intellectual, well-educated, uh, uh, black middle class family, actually, uh, uh, and I was just dropped into the middle of the whole thing, trying to
That's the
figure it out.
context in which you, right? And I see that context is a context that's going to saturate you in blackness, and in the ways in which Stephen Henderson talked about the notion of saturation. But you also experience life itself, right? So one of the things I recall from something I read about you is that in terms of that your parents always put you in majority black spaces.
Yeah, wow, you did some research. Well,
No,
you watched my TED talk, so that alone, I mean, I owe
no,
you. I owe
yeah,
you
yeah,
a
I know
big.
you can't talk, but I did some more reading, called up some people.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh man, well,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, yeah.
Well, man, you blew my mind so much with that. I forgot the question.
So the
Um,
answer is you went through some experiences because your parents consciously put you in
oh
majority
right.
spaces, which comes back to our question about socialization. So what I'm interested in is this: like, I grew up with a guy who's maybe even lighter than you, right? Cat named Jeffrey Perkins, and so we're the same age, went to kindergarten, all of that. And Jeffrey would remark, uh, he would say that on the same day, he could be called the N word and you half white son of a bitch. So
Listen,
that's a particular kind of experience, right?
yes, it is. No, that's right. That's right. And they did do that, and I found out, you know, I guess in my mind, I was thinking, yeah, you know, they were like, they had a reason and purpose, and there was part of that, but it's also sometimes just the weird way that life works out, circumstances. But for whatever reason, that was the case. I mean, I even went to a Black Montessori.
Ooh.
Y'all don't listen. You might know, but a Black
I
Montessori
never even knew
is
there
a
was.
whole other.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's deep. Well, you know, you got that Montessori movement
yeah,
around
yeah.
schools, and then a Black version of that. Whoa, beautiful. But it's just, I just was always like, was in rich environments. I mean, I could see that in retrospect, um, and 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 a lot of different kind of teachers, you know, patient ones, committed ones, knowledgeable ones, all around, you know, across the board, and taught you different things. Um, but the thread, I guess, that yeah, that holds it together. Those were tough. Those were not easy days for a young Zebulon Miletsky all the time. And but what it does is made me stronger, I think, though.
Oh,
It,
absolutely, absolutely.
and you know, that's we could talk about being Black and what that means, but one of the things you need is to be strong.
Mm.
And as you know, as a young person, just so it was a daily kind of I would call it steel sharpening steel kind of thing all the time,
Mhm.
because yeah, although I was pretty sensitive young guy, and a very, you know, not the toughest, you know, I wasn't really like that, but it toughened you up, and then you hear, yeah, I've heard it all. Oh man, I could go into some things, and but and I even went into a real interesting a what do you call it, like a summer camp, real young age though, a summer camp. This was a predominantly Black camp
Mhm.
in the heart of of Roxbury and Dorchester. And then I found out later through research all that they went through to really build it up. They had a CDC movement, they had housing. It's called Lena Park. It's like an institution in Boston. But and I was just thrown in there. And you know, some kids made a tough go of it. You know, I have memories of those things, but I always just kept it going. You know, somehow I could recover and keep going. Or also I was good at making people laugh sometimes, and then that helped, you know. That kind of
Still,
get
brother,
you through.
it saves small people and people who don't fit the norm, right? Who are a little different. But but
No,
I'm just
definitely.
wondering that environment. How do you make the decision to become a Black historian, a Black studies scholar? What motivates you? I get the piece with the uncle, but what are the personal things that drive you in that particular direction?
Yeah, no, we're on it right now, because all those little experiences, you know, on the way toward growing up and all of that. I have to be honest. If I'm being honest, it had a big part to play in it. Uh, Maybe wanting to have something to prove, or wanting to have just to understand better. I think it's hard to explain all the different things that go into how we grow, socialize, mature, and all that. But but I know those experiences are there. They're still there with me. I can remember some of them like they were yesterday. And they do stem in some ways from some of the things we face as a people, you know, as a race. Some of
Mm,
the different things of why we put each other down sometimes. Why do we have that need? All of those complicated things.
right, right.
And but this wasn't I wasn't intellectualizing it. It was just happening to me, you know. And but over the years I wanted to understand better why, what is up with certain things that took place. um why some maybe in a typical group of Black folks, because like I said, the schools were always in the heart of Roxbury. I never went to school outside of Roxbury until I went to college. Every school I went to was in Roxbury. And
I want to go back to something you said. I don't know whether it was in the TED Talk or in one of the articles I read. You said that you had never been to Southie
That's
until
right.
you were like an adult or something. So you just Roxbury was like your complete boundary.
It was. It truly was. I was very typical Black Bostonian in that sense. Like, because that's what we did. That's what most of us did. Stayed within those boundaries where it was safe. Because to go across those things was no joke in Boston, especially in those earlier years of the 70s and 80s. Then things start to get a little better in the 90s and different things. But at those times, to do so was pretty much 98.9% chance of having some kind of violent encounter or being attacked. It's just that simple. But I think the thing I think is interesting for me is that I was so uh, in my mind, sort of see myself as Black. That it didn't occur to me. Maybe if I go over there, was anything gonna happen to me? Maybe, maybe not. But the thing is, I didn't even go. That's how I was just like, I'm not even gonna try.
You had no
You know,
interest.
I had no interest in testing out that theory or theorem. And then the first time I did go, we were accosted. First time,
Hmm.
first time over there.
How
You
old
know,
were you?
by then I was probably about 17 because I used to play baseball and we used to the team we had a game in
Right.
Southie. First time I was over there because we had to go because of the team.
Well, I have to tell you, the first time, no, the second time I was in Boston, I was with a friend and we had been at a summer school, right, for Black Studies. And we were at the airport and we were in our 30s and late 30s, or mid to late 30s. And my friend puts his bag down, and this white guy who's got to be at that time in well into the 60s, right? Keck is not physically capable of engaging us, but he tells my friend, "You put your bag, move your bag," and then he just starts kicking the bag and threatening my friend. And I'm like, does this guy know you can get a beat down here? But it was like the amazing thing that this old white guy would confront, middle, fairly young Black men like that. And I just wrote it. I said, this has got to be a Boston thing because I couldn't imagine it in Chicago, right?
Right. Yeah. A lot of hear that from a lot of brothers, who came through. You've been in other. They come to Boston. They're like this two horse, no count town. You know what I mean? Like we get this. They're like, where's the jazz clubs? Where's the culture? In that, or in more extreme cases, you got situations like that, where, I mean, that as a Bostonian, that makes sense to me that something like that could have happened because I don't want to, go. I wasn't there, obviously, but I know I have a sense that especially at a certain time, to be in the presence of a strong, confident Black uh, person, man or woman, from another city, probably that rankles, that and it's noticed in the white citadel that Boston can be. I would say, like that. I don't know how far we want to go with this, but it makes sense to me that
Yeah.
the yeah that it's a test, and I've been through many of those same tests myself in different ways. And then indeed, so many of us have in Boston. We're tested constantly like that. It's not unlike what our ancestors went through, uh, on plantations. I don't know how else to say it,
Absolutely.
where your loyalties tested. What kind of Negro are you? Where are you coming from with
Mhm.
things and that sort of thing? And so that's kind of commonplace to us but so it's made Black folks from Boston us also a certain type. We're sharp in our attitudes. We
Mm.
get a little bit we can get a little bit out of pocket
Okay.
sometimes with things as well because we've
Well,
been through a lot over
adversity
there.
does that, right?
Yes, it does. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And I wish white America understood better sometimes the discipline of patience and wisdom that some takes a long time to accrue, because if one were to respond to all the different
Oh,
slights, and it's
one of the things that Cedric Robinson remarks on in Black Marxism is the sheer humanity of African and Afro-descended people, that we've not been folks who seek revenge, and that to white people to see the amount of patience that we've had with their murderous asses is startling to them, and they can't fathom what's wrong with us, that we are not, every day given the rage that has to develop through our daily encounters, and the ways, the microaggressions, that we just don't lash out, like ravenous wolves or something, but we don't, and never have as a people.
that's right.
Someone just put in the chat, James, that the Trump administration would test that sentiment over the next 4 years.
Oh, there's a chat. Okay.
I want to follow that up for a moment, though. I got a graduate student, jazz, blues artist, and he was in the men's restroom in the building that the history department is in. And as he was leaving the urinal, this white guy started shouting at him, berating him, and then blocked the door. The guy was 100 pounds larger, right? And so my student does what any black man raised in the black working class would do. The guy blocks the door. He's bigger than him. You don't want to be in a confined space. He starts lighting him up. That's what you got to do. You got to hit him, and hit him first, right? And my thing is, when did white men start doing that kind of shit when they by themselves? And I think this is a Trumpism. This sense now that they they've always thought they had the right, but they never had the confidence to go at us like that one on one. And so I think we're going to see more of these kinds of little tests where you have to make a decision right then and there. Are you going to do some crazy Michelle Obama stuff and go high? Or are you going to knock a person out?
Yeah, well, it's deep because I know that if I understand it correctly, I know Francis Cress Welsing has that basic theory about there's an insecurity on the part of many white folks sometimes, because they are in the world context in the minority.
Right.
That's always been the case. Malcolm always reminded us about that, and just to keep and Du Bois, just to keep reminding us that now what that so so now if that's true on the global stage, then I guess, and since we're going through that now in the US, supposedly, among other things, that is the white males especially realizing that their dominance, that their prestige may be on the decline because of the changing demographics, then we can expect to see a lot of more of these kinds of things, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm certain. So let's get back to, so you, like a lot of your generation and my generation, we we gravitated to black studies, and in some sense, that experience comes to shape and define who you become. So what was it that attracted you to black studies as an undergrad, and what was it that made you make the decision that you would be, and I'm going to call you a black scholar activist, because much of the things that you're doing is aimed at change, right? Social change. So what pulled you to black studies, and then what made you make the commitment that this is what you're going to do for your life?
You know, it's complicated as I've thought about it over the years. I mean, uh, you know, I think the thing is that like it has to be qualified by my situation and my specific situation in the sense that when when people tell you, or let's just say like the fact that a lot of times people didn't always immediately recognize the fact that I was black at all, right?
Right, right, right.
And when you're in that situation, you have the option to pass, right? I mean, that's not
Mm.
never been in my, field of vision, never was an option in my mind, not ever, not once.
Even as a
Uh,
child?
even as a child, even as a child. Now, does it happen sometimes? Unintentionally, perhaps it does.
People
Uh,
interpreted you one way and you weren't in a situation where you could correct it?
Yeah, yeah. But like any black person, we all have our moments of that clash with the larger culture, or that is to say, that built-in part of being American that I don't there's no shame in it, that you makes you want to be part of the larger world and accepted in it. And then when one finds out through some moment or something that you are blocked from it
Right.
somehow. I have that too. I had a lot of I had situations like that, and that was really about freshman year in college. Actually,
Mm.
that was where I really hit the color line, I'll call it. And whereas being black and being mixed meant one thing in my hometown and in the community and
Mm.
etc. It came once I went into the college environment, even though it was also Boston College. Could have been farther away in terms of Boston in a large sense, and so then it almost became like it was like something that was part of me, was always with me, which was blackness, became like a life raft. I didn't I took it for granted. I think before college,
Yeah.
I knew who I was. You know, uh, where you do things, different things and stuff, but then the color line hit pretty hard. I was like, you
Yeah.
know so then once
But,
you
but
know
can you specify the color line hit hard? I got an assignment that I've been doing probably for my 30, at least 30 of my 33 years in academia, where the first assignment students are asked to write about how they came to understand that they were black, whatever their class is and their gender, and to discuss, identify critical incidents, right? And with, I would say probably half of the students over since 1988, 92 actually when I started doing it, since 92, have said that these are kids that also went to school with white folks, in Illinois. And they said that they had some white friends in high school, one or two, right? And both of them came to the U of I. But when they got to college, those friendships ended. And they're somewhat hurt by that, but it's also revelatory for them. So when you
yeah.
say the color line hit you hard, what's the circumstances that you're talking about?
Well, there's a few things, but I think that it took me a while to understand this, but I think where I really felt it the most was in my interaction with white males, because sometimes that goes in a complicated way. They, out of everyone, they're looking at me probably the most suspiciously of anybody else. You
Mm.
know, who
Yeah,
is this?
yeah,
Because it's like okay, they don't know how to relate. Because it's like, are you one of us, another? You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah,
are you? You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
So that's
yeah,
because I had gone through stuff certainly within the black world, in the black community, tough things. Some people were going to be friends, some people were not.
right.
Some people were going to accept me, some people could not and would not. And so that was one thing. But then once I went to college, then I'm interacting with white professors, white men, who
And
who
they
who who
assume
did their who
you're
made it clear what my place was.
Wait, but did they initially assume you were white and then they find out, or did they always operate from the standpoint that they knew you were black?
See, that's the problem. I never know. You know, I don't know. I can't figure that part out. Because but people are quite savvy, quite crafty. They might. I think my suspicion these days is that they do know, and they want to know where's your alliance though? Where's your allegiance? Uh, where do you stand? If the case is that you are part black and you and all that identify as such, are you with us, are you with, and so then I get like this, I mean it's a very strong, uh it's different than the typical sort of racial microaggressions that what a lot of us might go through
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
me, because it's sort of a sense of I don't know. I know a lot of the older generations used to talk about people who could pass for white getting angry with that white people would get angry when they
Discovered
thought,
the word, yeah.
yeah, that they were being deceived or somehow. And so I don't think it's anything more than that, but that can produce a certain response that is very peculiar. You
Hmm.
know, it's all at once confusion, but also feeling of betrayal or something like that.
Yeah.
How could you be? Why do you identify as black? I mean, I think it's basically what they're saying to me.
You should be with us.
Yeah, why would you want to cast your lot with that? You look white enough. You could jump
Yeah.
over. I think
Yeah.
you could jump over, man. It's just unthinkable to me. I mean, when you come from the heart, and the most tender memories of my grandmother and family, and just all of that, and all of those memories are saturated in blackness, as you were saying. You know, uh, there's just no way. So anyway, what I'm saying by that is, once you reject that, then you got to figure out something to do for a living, I guess, because I'm not going to go corporate. I ain't doing that. I'm not doing that stuff. You know what I mean? like,
Right, right,
like everything I've been through in my life tells me I got to fight
mm.
for, in my lifetime while I'm here on this earth, and whatever I can make, however I can contribute, right? How I can support. Um, then because that was always the part that I think just hit me, and that's when I got interested in Black studies.
See,
You
this
know,
is that I'm really, really curious about because, well, you have to tell me if I'm misreading your experience, but I was taking it that you're in an all black experience and your parents are consciously doing that in order to develop a certain type of consciousness and commitment to the black community. And you've got an uncle who's a scholar, so you're getting introduced to, intellectual things about black people. So I would think that black studies wouldn't have the same, like, oh wow, we pretty bad as a people moment for you that you already had some of that. But then when I read how you reacted to black studies, it was like, oh, okay, that's interesting that it still hit you with a power.
yeah, you're right, Sundiata. That's true. That is kind of how it was, because um, I went to those kinds of schools. We used to sing, the Black national anthem. They used to call it Negro national anthem back
Yeah,
then, and every day, learning Black history, facts, and information. I mean, I had went to some good Black schools in Boston. Some of them that came out of that post, well, actually was part of busing in response to that whole mess of
yeah,
school desegregation.
yeah,
They did create some really one particular elementary school named after William Monroe Trotter. So I went to middle school named after Phyllis Wheatley. So Black history was definitely there. It was always around me. Um, that's for sure. So it wasn't like that, but and I always liked history anyway, like U.S. history, all kinds, any history, always liked it. And I don't know. Part of it was I think, like I say, once I started to sort of see the rules of engagement when I got to college, what was happening, what 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 the game was about, you know, then I felt like I needed information
Mm.
immediately. I needed to, you know,
Well,
to know what I was, some weapon, yeah, to know what I was talking about. Um, and then that, you know, I was always into it, but then it just became um, a lot. It came alive, and it was a day to day experience. How I'm, because I do still think, I believe, and you know, that story that you shared, uh, a confident black man and confident black woman um, will cause, you
yeah.
know, sort of things around them, heads turn, people make, you know, the eyebrows are go, what's, you know, because we're not, that's what, you know, we're in the social order, we're not really supposed to do these things. We're not, you know, education's always been seen as a threat.
Yeah.
And as I was getting my education, I felt like I had to really fight for it, and I needed information to push back on some of the stuff of people who would try to hopefully, you know, like they did in high school, the guidance counselor says, maybe you should, not everyone's meant to go to college, you know, maybe you should go get a trade or something like that. You know, if you're foolish enough to, not, and no shame on anybody, it's not about foolish, but
Oh,
if you get tricked like that,
right.
and
If
you
you don't know
know,
and believe you have other options, I mean, look, man, I think back about they literally had me in food service. They prepared me to be a waiter, man, or a cook. You know,
wow, wow,
I mean,
wow,
because that was the assumption for the folks in coming out of our community.
right, of course.
So
I mean, we're not meant to. I mean, this is a, you know, this is really like, you know, out on the battlefield kind of thing. That's how I was looking at it. I was like, I need to cram as much information into this brain as I possibly could get. I had a lot of other interests too, and I tried to was working on some kind of big theory about social movements. It never quite came together, but like,
keep working at it. Keep working at it. So
all right,
I want to kind of wrap this up, but I do want to talk about the fact that you moved, you took those personal experiences and you became a scholar of a particular experience. So I want to talk about mixed race studies and its relationship to Black Africana studies. Is there a formal relationship? Do you see that there is or should be? I mean, how do you deal with those two boxes?
yeah, that's a tough one. You know, in the '90s, when I was in college and when I was anticipating starting graduate school and all that, late '90s, because I did start in 1999, fall 1999. People were talking about mixed race stuff a little bit more. There had been a couple of interesting books. Maria Root did a
Mhm.
book. She had a mixed race Bill of Rights, and it was interesting. I was like, oh, okay. People were pointing out things, you know, about, you know, people like these giants in the African American experience, like Douglass and Booker T. Washington. They're actually mixed, you know, biracial and stuff. That had, you know, some obvious problems. That was kind of a clue to some problems down the road, I'll
Yeah.
say. But it I had very high hopes. I had really high hopes for that kind of work. And I was like, I wonder if it could ever be like a mixed race studies one day, you know, like how you have ethnic studies or black studies. And you
Well,
know, I
here's
was,
some fruition. There is mixed race studies, right? There's
there
journal
is, there is, there
scholars.
is.
I'm just
Yep, they call it.
wondering, what's the
Mhm.
relationship to Black Africana studies?
Well, that was the problem. I think it diverged, you know. It's called critical mixed race studies is what they, you know, I thought I was going to be kind of like helping to build some of that. But in my studies and research, you know, the data and the truth of things spoke a different tale, that I had to really go in a different direction. I had to follow what I was seeing and reading, especially based on a reading of race and Black studies. And but what it is, I think that the issue, I'll say, is that is an uncritical embrace of whiteness,
Hmm.
in kind of laid in there. Nothing, a glorified version of what a lot of us biracial folks may say, like, oh, the idea of having best of both worlds, right? Or people will say, not so much best of both worlds, but when people say, uh, okay, I'm also half white, what about that part? You're asking me to deny, that part of my identity. See, that's where that all went. I'm just going to sum it up like that because we don't have a lot of time. That's all where all that stuff went. And that's a problem, because that doesn't give a good measure, I think, of the of true experience of at least Blackness. Because, mind you, the mixed race studies also looks at Asian and white. It looks at
Hmm.
Hispanic white. It's not just Black and white. And that was another thing. I was more interested in the Black and white part, and kind of went in a different direction.
One of the things that bothered me about it is that I thought that it brought race back in and centered it in a way that made no absolute sense. Like, when we were first talking, I was saying that I see Blackness as socialization. The biology is the ticket to the game, right?
Mm.
But it doesn't determine where you sit and the experience you have while there. I think that that's socialization. So when I've had conversations with mixed race scholars and people who think of themselves as biracial, and I always say, well, if we honestly believe that Homo sapiens sapien is one race, right? Neanderthals are another race, but then how can you be biracial if there's no race? If that's mythological. And so this question of when someone says, what about the white part of me? Were you socialized in white social institutions in terms of family and intimate things so that you have a consciousness of yourself as white? And most of the people I've met who, are classified as mixed, their, their grounding has been in the Black community.
Yeah, yeah, that's me too. Especially, and even the term biracial, it's almost like a subset of the Black experience. I think one that's
Yeah,
relatively recognized and understood, by our people. Like, no, people know what that means. Uh, but yeah, that was. I think that's part of the issue. I remember, but I don't want to generalize this. You got
right.
different thinkers out there. Rainier Spencer, for example, who, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he was at University of Las Vegas for a few years, many years, but he came to I was attending this mixed race conference that they had at Harvard. Actually, it was year 2000, I believe,
Mm.
and he came. I think he was the keynote speaker, and man, he just busted everyone's bubble. He told us, he said that when you are being, pulled over or being identified, is that the Black part or the mixed part or the, and we were like upset, man. I was one of them. I was upset. I was like, how could you say this? But over time, I was like, he makes a good point.
Yeah,
It's the Blackness
yeah,
that
because you can.
matters there. That's the thing, not the white part. It kind of changed my whole trajectory about thinking on that. His work is pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's change this up, but I want you to tell me about this project that you at least played a leading role in, if not the originator, writing beyond the prison. So what is that project? And you guys are doing it at Stony Brook, right? And it's
Yes.
for the Africana studies. So what is that?
Yeah, yeah. That is definitely not the originator. It's a team of us. It starts with me and another colleague named Robert Chase, uh, a friend and colleague at Stony Brook. He is, he wrote the book "We Are Not Slaves," looking at the prison system. He's a noted prison, scholar and that kind of thing. And me and him met through Rhonda Williams,
Okay.
because we both had a postdoc at Case Western, different years. And then we both ended up at Stony Brook. And so we have a good way of working. And so he kind of really sort of, I would say, opened up some of the doors, and we matched our thinking together on some of these questions. Me sort of talking about it, from the Black Studies side, that I understood and know, and how and the history there, and he knows it extremely well. So we kind of wanted to organize together, and he introduced me to some of the folks. One in particular, a brother by the name of Ivan Kilgore, who is incarcerated for life in Vacaville, California, out there, and he is, like a lot of men, like Malcolm, like others who have been, in prison walls, uh, become self-taught,
Right.
and in all things law, everything. This brother is amazing. He wrote a great book, and so anyways, that's
What's the
how this
title of the
started.
book? What's the title of the book in case some of our listeners
It's called
get it?
Domestic Genocide.
Okay.
Domestic Genocide. It's
Yeah.
on, I think it's on Amazon. Check him out. And so his book is the first one of this 100 books. Brother Ivan Kilgore, when
Now,
been
when
organizing.
this 100 books. See, what's the 100 books?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So
Right.
writing beyond the prison,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, is the is taking these writings from prisoners, from those who are incarcerated, and editing them basically, and
Ah.
preparing them to get them up onto an archive, which we set up recently, just unveiled it actually last week. Digital archive. It's called the Living Archive. We're basing that on the WPA slave narrative idea, of trying to get the words and the thoughts and the ideas and the narratives, the testimonials, all of, because not all of it's narratives. Some of them are poetry. There's poetry. There's fiction, science fiction. It's a lot of
Yeah.
things, and get it out there to people so that they can, get a sense and see. People are trying to understand a little bit better now mass incarceration, and so that's what that is, writing beyond the prison. But it started off as this 100-book project that Ivan Kilgore did. He's the one that got a lot of the manuscripts, talking to other brothers and getting them, hey, maybe you should write, become a writer, put your thoughts down, and that kind of thing.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Yes.
So now, in 2 years ago, University of North Carolina Press issues your study on school desegregation in Boston. Before busing, a history of Boston's long Black freedom struggle. Now, when you know Boston and the busing crisis comes to mind, I see this that famous image where there's this one white guy comes up behind the black guy and grabs him and is holding him, and then this guy is ramming the American flag into him. That's what I see. You go before that incident and look at the development of Black folks' response to how do we provide our children with a quality education that reflects them in it, right? So tell us the story.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that violence that took place, that photograph, which was very famously, shared and people saw it, it was shocking to a lot of people. And well, why is that shocking? I mean, one, I think some people felt like they see the sort of paradox of Boston. It's like, on the one hand, it's supposed to be this very open, educated, enlightened space, and yet you have that photograph that speaks a whole different story. And
Yeah,
it's true. I mean, these two narratives have been existing there for quite some time, and really building up. attention. Um, that photo, I think, uh, and it's so emblematic of America itself. It's just captured all of it right there.
Yeah.
But I think as you see in that photo and in another footage and things, the hatred, the rancor was so extreme. I mean, it took people's breath away. I know people were shocked, in the nation, in the country at large. And I think because people have this sort of storybook version about Boston, it is in a lot of our American history textbooks, the revolution, and they know the symbolism.
Liberal city, right? Even though
You
we
know,
know it's got a history of deep race. I mean, the stuff that Bill Russell used to write about.
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right.
There's this
That's right.
image of an enlightened, quote unquote, liberal, progressive city.
Yeah, exactly. So in writing this book, I knew I was going to have to deal with all of those things, and it's not a small topic to take on. It was and Boston is this sort of pride of place in a lot of people's minds. This is, the center and the outpost of the sort of northern, um, I don't know, even know what to call it, like, in terms of the educational aspects, Harvard being there, the first, high school in America, Boston Latin, all these sort of first Boston, first public library too, and its connection. I guess it's part of the faulty connection that we assume that education makes for a more enlightened,
Yes.
body politic, and that. But I'll tell you this: I've really seen some bigger lessons since the book came out and stuff, uh, which is that which is the empowering force that education can be,
Hmm.
and the powers that be, the ruling class, knowing that, and so there's no coincidence that this is the thing that gets denied. That's the area that's not underfunded, under resourced, because people know. And I also realized that Black people are not the first group in Boston to have that done to them, because the English and the Anglo sort of, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the proper
Chester.
Bostonian, but the Yankee class, they've been doing that. They were doing that to the Irish, and they
Yeah.
were doing that to a lot of groups. And so you've got a kind of a sort of hierarchy there of whiteness in Boston too, depending on
Right.
what one's
Right. Right.
background is. So, uh, so, but what I was trying to say is that you know in South Boston and on the the anti-busing side, they're feeling the power and the heel of the boot of the federal government, because it's a federal court order.
Hmm.
That's a lot of force. You just can't fight that.
But
And
how
and
do you
but
get
they attributed it to Black people, like you all did this. you know.
that? But
Right.
can you talk about the process of getting to the busing crisis? Because much of your book picks up before that and offers a counter narrative to what you were talking about earlier, that Boston is this liberal space. So that counter narrative that focuses on what Black people did with what was done to them, right? Their building of independent schools, and they're challenging the rigid apartheid structure. And again, we got to always emphasize that when we're talking about apartheid, and the word should be apartheid as opposed to segregation, because that shit even sounds soft, doesn't it? Uh, with segregation, you get focused on what they call petty apartheid. If you're talking about using different water fountains, but with grand apartheid, we're talking about power. When you
Mm,
said something about that's when you're going up against power, a structure, right?
yeah.
Something
Yeah. No
hard.
doubt.
So
Mhm.
talk about the ways in which Black people challenge and try to evade that the imposition of that structure.
Yeah, it's almost like everything I think you would think it was when you put it together in a common sense way. Because Harvard's there, because Boston University is there, because of all these universities, Boston's always been a magnet for some very intelligent black folks over the years and over the
Mm,
decades. And if one can fit in to the sort of milieu there, in an intellectual space, political space. It's exciting. It can be an exciting. There's not much open at night and stuff like that. It's kind of boring in that way. But book wise, if you love books, if you love knowledge, this was a place to go and be in
mm,
that sense. And why do I say that? So in fighting that power dynamic, that apartheid, and you're right, that is the right characterization. Um, you got every kind of think about every kind of radical approach, every kind of thinker and rational reasoned black folks in the community that can debate things with one another too, maybe sometimes in a rough way, but
mm.
that's what remember also growing up too, which was because I should have said this earlier, but my mom and was a teacher in one of the schools, a black independent school called Page Academy. So I grew up doing Kwanzaa. I didn't go to the school, my brother did, but as a family member, I would be at the Kwanzaa celebrations. But I grew up in a black power space in Boston.
Right.
I now see that. I didn't know that then. In Roxbury and Fort Hill. And so you get people gathered there who some of them had gone to Harvard, and they have a very sophisticated approach. So that's why I took it back also to Du Bois in Boston, Booker T. Washington's interest in Boston, um, to
And
let
of course,
people know that Boston's been a Trotter, obviously. Yeah, William Monroe Trotter, thank you. That Boston's been a rich space in terms of black thought and black leadership. It turns out, it's the best kept hidden secret,
right.
despite the images that went out about school desegregation, what we were actually watching was a city on the ropes, uh,
Mm.
trying to deal with some very savvy and strategically minded organizers like Mel King, Ruth
Oh, yes.
Batson.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? This is this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
this is and so Boston's so what I also one secret goal of was I wanted our colleagues and compatriots and people to know the organizing node that Boston has been too.
Mhm.
And 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 it really did take a special approach because it was a real mess. Nobody wants I no one had it was interesting to me that no one had really written that much about Boston in this way, but I do understand now because it's a real hard thing to sort it all out. So you had nationalists, you have Garveyites, always had a strong Garveyite strain, a lot of West Indians in Boston.
Oh,
Remember Malcolm, he goes to stay with his
right.
half
Right.
sister.
Right.
It's set up already. And so that's the tradition that I was trying to draw on. I wanted to shed light on, and also black journalism coming out, not just Trotter's paper, but you had West Indian newspapers. You had a lot of other black newspapers that were sort of charting a path forward. And education has got to be a key cornerstone in that. That's the very thing that a lot of people move to Boston for: better jobs and better education for their kids. And then you get there and they don't have that. And in fact, you're getting damaging lessons, more damaging maybe than the place in the South you might have moved from.
Mm.
That's not gonna work, you know?
No, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. So
Yeah.
look, let's shift. It's 8:05, and I'd like to get us to about 8:20, and then open it up for questions um,
Oh,
from
cool.
the from people in the chat. So I want you to talk about. You're very involved in the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. I think you're in your second term as a member
Yeah.
of the executive council, and you've lead the marketing division and serve on a number of other committees. So Talk about what you do and what Asalah does.
Okay, yeah. Well, Asalah, as we call it, is the Carter G. Woodson organization. I know most people watching this probably will know that already, who founded Black History Month. And, I have the distinct honor and pleasure to direct some of those marketing and public relations efforts to continue, to get the word out about the association. It's interesting. I found out, later on. I read Professor Burness's book about Carter G. Woodson and public relations. Public relations, turns out, was a very key part of Carter G. Woodson's program.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Burness Mars book, and so I feel good about that, because that it makes sense to me too, because in order to bring about something like Black History Month or just celebration of Negro History Week, even judging today by the amount of people who are not necessarily predisposed to celebrating Black History Month, never mind the opposition to us.
Right, right.
It's an uphill fight, and so yeah, that's a great thing, and to have the trust of the membership of Asalah. Our members are very important, and it's a member-driven organization. And so, as Cynthia, they give us, our marching orders to some extent, and an outline of where we need to be going and what we need to be doing to serve our national organization. And so as things happen regionally, the crisis down in Florida, around Black history teaching, we're seeing that popping up still in other places. Um, you know, my involvement will basically be, trying to increase the awareness about the organization, about those kinds of issues, and just help Asala continue to evolve in this ever changing political space that we're in, because this thing that Carter G. Woodson built, it lasted for over 100 years,
That's right.
and that's hard to say. Too many Black institutions that have been around that long and found a way to survive. There's not that many, and we're one of them. So um, yeah, that's basically what I do, and also we make sure that that we have that fiduciary trust and responsibility with our membership.
Well, you mentioned something about these political times. So, uh, November 5th, Tuesday, um, we're plunged into a deeper level of this crisis that I refer to as the third or the new nadir. How did you react to the outcome?
Whew, yeah, I'm still recovering. Just, I mean, I try to be a good organizer or radical. I don't know what. Think, and try to keep some discipline. But um, I think I'll say a couple of things. I mean, my first reaction was really an emotional one, probably like most people. But it also got me a little bit more interested in Trump as a historical figure, good, bad, or otherwise. Because now you have someone coming in for a second term. He's made some unprecedented history. That's history, American history happening. So the historian side of me is kind of like interested to check all that out. But obviously, personally and politically, I couldn't disagree more vehemently with the agenda and the energy behind it and where it's going. But I take solace in the fact that our ancestors suffered this and worse, um, and they got through it. They survived it, and we got a fight on our hands. I hope people realize that we have got a fight on our hands like no other time before in that sense, even though there are precedents for it. But if we're not
Mhm.
careful, we are really getting taking some losses over the last few years in terms of the Supreme Court, in terms of major changes that affect our life outcomes. And people joke about stuff. Sometimes a joke can become reality. I remember people were joking last time when Trump became president. Oh, they're trying to put us all back into slavery. Ha ha ha. And then here, day after, or I think it was the day after the election, all those text messages that which is a hoax, I guess. But obviously somebody's thinking about it. And so
Mhm.
I would say like that to me, I wouldn't brush those things aside at all. If we don't get strategically serious about like and really blocking this in a chess, not checkers type way, then we're gonna end up getting pushed back way farther than we might even have ever believed possible in the 21st century. That's what I think.
Trump, I don't know whether it was yesterday or 2 days ago, he made the comment that he was going to stop, he was going to tax the endowments of colleges and universities that continue to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that he was going to use the money to give the money to what he said were those students who were discriminated against through that process. So, in effect, he was calling for reparations for white people. Right?
You have to
And,
laugh a little bit, like, yep, yep, I saw that.
and I don't think people understand the gravity that if Trump begins to do any of those things, right, you're one saying that it's not just a shutting down of DEI operations, Black Africana Studies is seen as DEI, right? All of us who teach in Black studies, Black Africana Studies, fall within their understanding of that term.
Sure do.
Moreover, when they say they're going to get rid of 50,000 federal bureaucrats, the civil servants, well, the civil service, federal and state, right? And maybe to some degree local, municipal, but certainly federal and state. In terms of the federal bureaucracy, African Americans represent more than 20% of the federal bureaucracy. It's one of the few
Mm,
job categories in which we are overrepresented. So, an attack, and this is what Reagan did, right? When he went after federal bureaucracy, shrink the
yeah,
government. That
yeah.
always means a loss of jobs for the black middle class. And then, of course, it's combined with cutting social services and reproductive services that many of the black working class, particularly its poor sector, depends on. So, this is a declaration of war.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the comparison to Reagan is so apt, you know, because remember, because I grew up in the '80s. That's the first president I really remember, and remember people used to make fun of Reagan. It was sort of bumbling, oh, didn't understand and all that stuff. But remember he makes his campaign announcement in Philadelphia, Mississippi.
That's right.
There's no coincidence. There's no this is a very strategic, a lot of things
Well,
like
but
that.
can
Then
I clarify? I mean, many of our listeners know what that is, but just in case, say what you mean by Philadelphia, Mississippi. Why is that important?
that is where uh, uh, the the deaths of
Movement.
Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney um, took place. And and in that campaign, in the civil rights movement. So when you kicking off your campaign there, you're in a subtle way communicating, to a certain segment of the population who will understand that symbolism, and then also others who will dismiss it as simply, oh, we don't know why that, they don't know,
That's right.
or that it just doesn't mean anything, right?
But you
So
heard me say, why would a man who was born in Illinois near Chicago, became famous in Los Angeles, became governor of California in Sacramento, go to a little small all-white town, Philadelphia, Mississippi, that's only famous for one thing, the murder of three civil rights workers, two black, two Jewish actually, and one African American.
right.
Why would you go there?
Yeah, exactly, exactly, and so it's a declaration of war, and it was on the civil rights
Mm.
stuff, the gains of the civil rights movement. Uh, but remember, then it was almost impossible to, you'd be laughed off to ever say that Reagan was racist. When and nobody really believed, like, you couldn't prove it, you just couldn't prove it. But there were things like that was like, no, there's something there, and because he was so kind of amiable and all that. And so that's a form of authoritarianism of a different kind, and it was then. And that's what I mean when I say I'm kind of interested in Trump as from a historical perspective, looking at that. But and what I see is an American fascism. What I see is a rise of a neo-authoritarian state, American style, whatever that's going to mean. And I guess that means whatever they can get away with, while still maintaining the illusion that America is, still a democratic country, because that seems to be the only litmus test. I mean, people, I think we all, I forgot, I blocked out a lot of things. I forgot about a lot of black churches that were being burned during
Oh,
when Trump was, remember that?
you're right.
And
You're
then,
right.
and Reagan, and, see, so, when you desegregate or unsegregate or unapartheid or whatever,
Right.
deapartheid, you know, those people don't just disappear overnight. These are people that have been used to a certain thing and then are now asked to change. And what all they really do, I think, as we've discovered to our shock in the early 21st century, because a lot of these things, I think we thought we were settled. We thought we had settled a lot of this in the 90s and 2000s. Most of us did. Maybe others knew differently, and then these things are coming back up. Why? You know, uh, and so we have to be really, aware. And Trump is a lot like Reagan in that sense. The joking, the memes, the dancing. They made songs out of it. We're singing, we're joking. I mean, the Black Jobs thing was funny, but I think we're, it's real easy to be confused. And in that sense, it's not different from old fascism, because fascism then was also apparently confusing. People weren't sure what they're seeing or witnessing, the propaganda, the effectiveness of that.
Mhm.
And uh and in an insecure time, maybe feeling like, well, maybe a strong man leader is what was needed then. And I guess one can only conclude that that's what people might be thinking again. And it's so, I I really think too. The other last part I'll say is, I want to. I think that ever since Obama was president, I think when Obama became president, we became involved in a way with the government and federal government, then I don't know that we ever completely had been before. Right? We were in proximity, we were near it, but then to have when a black man became president, I think a lot of us felt an ownership and an involvement. I know I did, in the country and in politics in a way I hadn't felt before. I want to go back to the time where we don't have this is y'all's problem. You know what I mean? Like like this is not ours to solve, you know, because I feel that I think that's where we were. We were feeling that pressure, or here comes another. we put our best and brightest out. A black woman's going to come and help save
Yeah.
all of this. You know
Yeah.
what? Black women are tired. We're all tired right now, I think. And
We got a hell of a job before, because
so,
I want to go back to some in terms of the Reagan piece. Reagan did begin to cut those federal jobs, right? And it did have a devastating impact on the black middle class. And his cutting of the social services had a equally, if not more so, devastating impact on the black working class. And that we seem to forget the impact of unionization and public sector employment, what that did to advance the African American community. Because when you start looking at capital, there's no capitalist industry that employed black people in at the level of 20% in anything other than low level jobs, operatives maybe, but not in decision making job, only in the public sector. And that's the greatest accomplishment of the civil rights movement, and to a lesser extent black power, was opening up the public sector
mm,
in the federal government to employ black people in supervisory positions. And Reagan understood that, and Trump bumbling. But if you go back and you look, even Obama as a neoliberal, black people in public sector jobs lost jobs because Obama. Well, I'm gonna just say this. You can react to it, right? Like Reagan had about 20 years in office, so you got 8 years of Reagan the man. Then you got Papa Bush, right? So that gives him 12. Then you got Clinton, he gets 8. What is that? That's 20. And then he gets another 8 with Obama. Obama was a neoliberal in the same way that Reagan was. And we forget that because of the color of his skin. But let us not be confused about who Obama was. He was a continuation of neoliberalism. He's a goddamn Reaganite in terms of the actual policies he put forth. It's only Biden and Harris that attempt to break neoliberalism, right, and return to liberalism, i.e., the manufacturing
mm.
sector, extending unionization, and extending reproductive services and those kinds of things. Obama was cutting all of that. And I know you've done some work on
It's a little like well, you make a good point. I know it gets harder and harder to defend the man, but it's you make a good point, and and it is become the sort of it's the way of Democrats finding their way back to the White House. Because don't forget Clinton. You mentioned Clinton. Being a centrist, and he was like basic. I mean, after '94, after the midterm elections, he basically became a Republican in all ways, shapes, or forms. He out Republican them. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
much to our suffering. But and in the community, meanwhile, the black community was suffering under the three strikes and the prison bill,
yeah,
which created a lot of this stuff. But yet we were talking about, oh, this is the first black president. Bill Clinton, he's got Negro tendencies and so on and all that, which is funny. But the thing is, it obscured the real fact of what he was doing to us. And so I see Obama in that same tradition. I
yeah,
think you're not wrong, and that's true in a lot of ways. That was true. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Oh, but don't forget, and also don't forget, Reagan was a Democrat for
That's right.
most of his life, most of his career. That no one's ever really told the story there. I'd like to really understand, because so much of that was also a war on Johnson's Great Society. He wanted to
That's
dismantle
right.
all that stuff. I feel like something went down between Johnson and Reagan that maybe that's why Reagan left the party. I haven't figured out the evidence on that.
Mm,
There's something they
mm.
do cross paths when Johnson's president, but I don't know. But
But you know, the biographical argument is that Nancy Reagan, a right-wing fascist out of Chicago, wealthy family, that she turned him out
okay.
and brought him to deep conservatism.
Oh, okay. That's possible.
And
That's
that's what
possible.
happened with him. Um,
Okay. Okay.
but
I always wondered about that. But I mean what we start to see is like, I mean, listen, the fact is too that, even Biden has some things in his past that was
oh,
not great when it came to our people, especially around the school desegregation stuff. And people can change.
not only that, now wait a minute. Biden wrote the 1994 crime bill that Clinton got passed. So all the things you were talking about, three strikes,
That's right.
expanding the categories that were worthy of the death penalty, that was all Biden. I mean, I was fearful when Biden came in because I see that whole legacy. Biden also made it harder for people to file bankruptcy, right? He
Yeah.
Biden was the boy of the credit card industry, those banks in Delaware.
Mm,
But
mm.
reality is that what Biden actually did was to begin to try and break the neoliberal path.
I see
So
that.
yeah, he's got to be reevaluated differently because of what he attempted to do, he and Harris. Um,
Yeah, but probably outlived his usefulness. That's probably why they dropped the dude so quick. It's like everybody just, but um, yeah, yeah. This that the fact is there's a very small shade of difference between a Republican and a so-called Republican and a so-called Democrat. Unfortunately,
there is, but I think this is where we got in trouble. Is that we shrunk the difference more than it should be, right? Meaning that they're both capitalist parties. At the end of the day, but there's different strategies amongst the capitalist class, right? The fascistic folk are Republican. Those who think that, in Malcolm's metaphor, those are the wolves. The foxes who want to make sure that you get a little bit fat so they can eat you are the Democrats. And so, what I always try and say is this, my brother. Um, there's a difference between people who are doing very little to help you and are in some ways hurting you, and people who are organized for the purpose of killing you. The Republicans are organized for the purpose of killing us. The Democrats are perfectly willing to to watch us go down. You
mm.
know what I'm saying? But
I think it's true. Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
difference there.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Well, I can't say much more in response to that. That's it's devastating, and I'm in a chilling thought. I'm gonna have to sit with that one for a while.
People have enjoyed and are really into. They want you to rename some books, but they didn't have questions, right? So I guess you answered the question, but could you named a couple of books? So one is of course your own book, Before Busing, right?
Yes.
And what's the subtitle on that?
A history of Boston's long Black freedom struggle.
Because what I'm doing now is typing it into the chat so that people will have it.
Thank you. Before
Okay.
busing.
And then you mentioned a book by the brother that's incarcerated. Was it domestic genocide? But what was his name?
Yeah, his name is Ivan, Ivan, normal spelling, I guess. Kilgore, Kilgore.
And that's domestic genocide.
Yes.
Okay, my brother. I have. We have been talking for maybe a couple of years, getting you on, and I am so pleased to have had you join Real Talk History as a weapon for Black liberation today. And it is, do you have any last words or announcements?
Uh, I think that I really appreciate being on and be part of this dialogue with you because it's you always have a way of making me think, and and you do that for our people as well, and so we
Thank you. Thank you.
uh, uh, thank goodness we didn't listen to those guidance counselors, and because we would have we
Yeah,
would have
we're
lost some major warriors, in this fight against against aggression and for our survival, quite frankly. And so I just salute you, man, and thank you. Always have always remarked and been in awe of some of our elders who who blaze the trail and who show us how to be courageous, because it's one thing we can read and learn all these things, but and when the moment comes, will you have the courage to speak truth to power,
That's right.
speak our minds intelligently, clearly, so that we can be clearly understood, and not you know, punked or played or dissed or any of those things, or they might try to, but we have our dignity. And so I just thank you for modeling that always in your work, scholarship. It has, I speak for a lot of people when I say this, very
Well, thank you,
inspiring,
man.
very
I
important.
really appreciate it. And I appreciate your work and your contributions, both in terms of the struggle, in terms of Asalah, and in terms of your scholarship. So let us sign off because my producer is about to go crazy because we went 2 minutes over.
All right.
Take care, man.
All right, Doc. Thank you.